All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. While we are waiting, I'm going to launch a poll for all of you just as a little warm-up activity, just to see what kind of sectors of international education you are interested in, or excuse me, sectors beyond international education that you are interested in. And if you want, also feel free to type in the chat and introduce yourself and where you are currently tuning in from. All right, see, so far most of you are interested in general higher ed outside of everything. So far split between DC and California right now. Probably makes sense given YPi and BayPi. All right, we got a Charlotte, Colorado. Oh, wonderful. Even Australia. Fantastic. Canada. All right. For our tech team on the back end, the BayPi Facebook group is also asking for the link to access. Right. Currently in international education, but who knows what the future holds. That's probably why you're here. All right, if you are just joining us, feel free to take part in the poll. You should see that on your screen in front of you, as well as introduce yourself in the chat. Hello, YPi board. Okay, we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. All right, a couple more from California. Okay, government or public policy is a sector that's starting to edge up on general higher education here in our poll, with over 50 of you voting. All right, and if you are having any difficulties with audio or video, please don't hesitate to let us know. We have Josefa from BayPi as well as Crockett, who's listed as YPi, standing by to help with any issues. So just feel free to let us know if you have anything that you're having trouble with. You can also, of course, close down some programs if they're using a little more bandwidth, if you're getting some shaky video or audio. And see if that works as well. Oh, gotcha. And if you have another industry that's not listed there that you're interested in, feel free to put that in the chat as well. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started quickly with a little bit of housekeeping.
Yes, so as you can probably tell, you are currently muted without video. We're in a webinar format right now. However, you do have access to both the chat and the Q&A function. So throughout our event today, please feel free to type in questions into that Q&A function, and we'll be monitoring those and collecting those for later after we go through kind of a main portion of the program with some prepared questions, and then we'll get to your questions. You can also see in the Q&A, you'll be able to kind of upvote if you see questions that you would have asked yourself or would like to hopefully see an answer to. So feel free to do that if you see that somebody already asked a question that you would have posed. And we also will be, as you can see, the session is being recorded. So we'll be sharing that recording out, and will be available for a certain period of time. So we'll make sure to get that information to you after the event.
Oops. All right, and I guess we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. Erin just spoke, I'll pass it off to her in a second, but my name is Kelsey Prima. I am with YPI DC. I'm the current chair of the board of directors for YPI, which is Young Professionals in International Education in DC. Hopefully some of you have been with us for some of our previous events. We are, of course, all virtual right now, but we do put on events every month for the international education field and connecting international education professionals in the DC metro area. So if you haven't already, please feel free to check us out. In international education, I work with ICEP Study Abroad as a university relations manager, specifically for Central Europe and the UK. So work more specifically on managing exchanges, working with our member universities, and developing programs as well.
And my name is Erin Kelly Weber. I'm a member of BayPi on the events committee and leadership team. So BayPi is the Bay Area Young Professionals in International Education. We are a professional and social network for international educators in the Bay Area in California. And we put on a number of different events, both social and professional development related, to encourage collaboration and engagement among professionals in the field. So at the end of our session today, you'll see information for both of our organizations if you want to connect with us, hopefully in the future, and check out the various events that we have going on, which are happening still virtually. So we hope to see you at a future event later on. And with that, we will get to introducing the panelists, the people you came to see today. So without further ado, Priyanka, please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, good evening to my East Coast folks. I'm Priyanka Vakil. I'm currently a senior associate at Grant Thornton Public Sector here in the DMV area. So my job description can vary from day to day, but essentially what I do is provide support to federal agencies and public sector clients in helping them figure out and navigate the challenges that they're experiencing in doing their business effectively and efficiently. This can look like helping them assess and evaluate pain points that they're experiencing, to getting in there and working specifically on delivery aspects, like helping them write a report, conduct the research, and help them with their strategic design of what they want to do next. Fun fact that I'm working on, my current client is a federal agency, and we're looking at how do you change the workforce? Is it possible to go all the way remote? Is it possible to have a hybrid remote workforce? Or do we want to try to stick for, pre-COVID status quo? I guess, I don't know if I need to go into a little bit more detail, but my journey through international education, it's less very professional, but more personal. Originally born in Nairobi, Kenya, my family immigrated here for the reason of, access to better education. That essentially led me to looking at that as a career. And after undergrad, I helped stand up a few programs and an orientation program specifically geared towards culture and ethics training before students departed for their study abroad exchanges. And then after that, did my master's in US foreign policy and national security, hoping that I would be able to break into the international education arena. It worked in a very different in a different way than I expected. So not in the traditional space, but I'm excited to talk more about that in detail. And then after that, I'm now in federal government contracting and consulting.
Great, thank you, Priyanka. Next up, we have Rebecca, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Lubitz Marchena. I am currently a senior content designer at Intuit. They are the people that make TurboTax and QuickBooks. Basically, what I do is a lot of writing. That's sort of what content people do. And I started off thinking I wanted to go into public health, actually, once I graduated college. Kind of dabbled in that a little bit, and that led me to sort of more of an international education focused nonprofit. So that's kind of where I learned everything. It was a tiny nonprofit. I sort of call it like a startup without any funding, because you do everything. You know, admissions, alumni relations, fundraising, recruiting, everything like that. So that was a great experience to really get my feet wet. And then from there, I moved to UC Berkeley, where I was for 5 years. And that's really where I started focusing more on content strategy and content design. So because of that, I think it made it easier for me to pivot, since I had sort of started building more specialized skills in content strategy. And so after a long process, which we can go into later, I ended up landing a job at Intuit doing content strategy and content design.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Oops. There we go. Mert, if you would like to take it from here.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Mert. I am a university recruiter at Duolingo, which is the world's most downloaded education app, 300 million user. I like to always, when I talk about myself about my work, I always say international educator and a university recruiter. International education is a path that I took, it came very randomly. My background is in software engineering, and when I was working as a software engineer, for some reason, different opportunities came up, and I switched to higher education, and from there to international recruiting back in Turkey, where my family is. And then after working in recruiting, university recruiting for about 4 years, I was looking for more and for improvement, like professionally, and that's when I decided to come to the US to pursue a master's degree at SIT Graduate Institute in Vermont. And I was there for a couple of years. Then I got a job with San Jose State as a university recruiter, and I moved to the Bay Area in 2016. And I've been here for 2 years. I was there for 2 years, and then after that, being in the Bay Area, and for obvious reason that I decided to move to tech. We can talk more about that. And I was with Year Up. I did diversity recruiting for an internship program at Facebook. Until recently, I was with Google. Then I shifted. I was lucky to get a job with my dream company at Duolingo, which is the perfect combination between international education and tech about 3 weeks ago. And I'm happy to meet with you guys and to talk to you folks about the path in more details and the opportunities that we have outside of international education, or the skills that we can basically use everywhere. The skills that we learn in international education and in education in general, it's a very transferable skill that we can use everywhere. It just depends on finding the right path and the right company. Thank you.
Thank you, Mert. And last but not least, Jessie.
Hi, I'm Jessie, and I'm getting notifications that my internet's unstable, so we'll do our best here. But I work at 2U, which is an ed tech company, and I work on the placement team as the network development manager. And on this team, we find placements for students in their master's degree programs, and I kind of manage developing all the networks that we need with hospitals and clinics kind of across the country for our students. Um, my background, I started off teaching in the classroom, and I taught though in Ethiopia, and kind of after that knew I wanted to stay within the international realm. So got my master's in international higher education and intercultural relations at Lesley. And then wound up working with Kelsey at ISEP Study Abroad, and did feel like I hit a little bit of a wall. I transitioned out of IE kind of prior to COVID, but it was, much more related to me wanting to kind of grow professionally and be able to advance my career. And I've been very happy with that decision.
Great, thanks, Jesse. All right, without further ado, we'll start getting into some of the questions we prepared. So some of you have addressed this a little bit, and really what made you decide to make the jump from your current field? You know, what were those push-pull factors that really made you want to leave international education? Apologies for the helicopters behind me. Jesse, why don't we start with you? As you mentioned, you kind of hit a wall in international education, and maybe if you're willing to share a bit more about that, and what were those push and pull factors for you?
Yeah. So I had a couple different roles in international ed before ISEP as well. And at each time I had my master's degree and felt like I kind of got to this mid-level position and then was just stopped there, and kind of, we're in companies that wanted to encourage you to stay or support you and grow, but there just wasn't a position for you to grow into because it was maybe a small nonprofit or whatever it may be. And so for me, I felt like I hit that at my last company, and I wasn't necessarily looking specifically to transition out of international ed, but when I was looking for positions, I was within the higher ed realm and kind of found 2U, which is a much larger company and has just a lot more opportunity for growth there. And I was really drawn to that type of career path. And in addition to that, I think I've always been interested in just gaining a lot of different experiences, and being young and being a millennial, I think it's rare that you stay in a company for a long time. So working for a for-profit actually did interest me to at least see if I liked it or not. And so far, so good.
Great, thanks, Jesse. Merritt, do you have anything you'd like to kind of, especially from the tech side, since you're in a slightly different position there, what really kind of made you want to move a bit from international education?
So my background is in software engineering, and I switched from engineering to education because international education specifically, because I like that environment, and I was involved back in Turkey with international students groups, with a variety of like cultural activities when I was there, and that helped me to make the shift. So this is international education is definitely something that I'm passionate about, and that's the main reason why I decided to come to the US to pursue my master's. And well, like there was a big difference between the international education in Turkey versus international education here. Like in Turkey, recruiters or people who work in international education, in a lot of cases, are being like treated like sales and marketing, and there's a lot of opportunity of growth. There's a lot of like mobility within the sector. But in the U.S., education system is a little bit different. And after being in higher education and international education for 4 years, I did like reevaluate my priorities, and like I was thinking about what would make any individual stay in a job, and I narrowed it down to like three things. First is the team and the company, and second is the opportunity of growth, and the third would be, of course, the financial side. So if you have two of these three, like from my opinion, you should stick around in that job. And when I started like looking around and like thinking, I started looking for companies who can provide me with these three. And like within the last 2 years since I left higher education, Duolingo is my fourth job. So that's like quite a lot of change. And I get asked about that in all the interviews. But again, the three, this like there was very limited opportunity of growth in international education in general. Financially, it is very difficult to survive with higher education salary in the Bay Area. And in terms of, like I had a great team, San Jose State was a great school. It's just like I had 1 out of 3. So I had to make a decision and move forward.
Thank you, Merit. Priyanka, what about you?
So this is actually one of the questions that made me really think about what I've been doing for my professional career. So a couple of things. I had been considering consulting for quite a bit of time since undergrad. And the structure of consulting really appealed to me in that you have an exposure to different sectors inbuilt within the firm, and you have the opportunity to work with different clients on different problems. So the appeal for me was that I know that I really like being challenged, but I don't really know, I'm not always sure when I'm going to be challenged, and that's the best part of the challenge that I appreciate. And around that time, I think one of my interests was actually to join the Foreign Service, because I figured that that sort of model of, going to post and doing different things and being in different cones lined up with what I was thinking. But the other alternative was consulting. And I actually got to experience something similar to that with the conjunction of a consulting style project in the form of a practicum focused on diplomacy and higher education. And I loved the style of that, where you are going in and, taking in everything that you've been learning, your intercultural competencies, the way you interact with different people, but also how do you work with other people to address challenges and pain points, and hopefully come up with, a solution. But that ended up leading me to an international development field. So in terms of international education, I haven't had the traditional experience. I had about, I think, a year worth of working in a higher education setting where I was helping, discuss some of these ideas of what are the logistics for going abroad? What are the issues of accessibility for people to even access opportunities like study abroad? Not even before they're pursuing this as a career, just in the whole initial experience. And that started to form a lot of things in my mind. And I think I keep telling myself that this is still my dream goal, is like, I would like to work in international education, but in areas of conflict. Where is the access the hardest, and where is it needed the most? Where can we make the argument the most? And let's just say, because I kept asking more and more questions, I didn't really feel like there was a push or pull factor. I felt like I was just being shoved anyways by the universe or the forces around me. With every rejection letter I got for an IE post, I'm like, all right, let's see what else is out there. Let's be gainfully employed. Let's make sure that we can pay our bills on time, especially living, in DC. And I'm really glad that this is happening between like the Bay Area and DC. So because these opportunities weren't really available in the IE space based off of what I knew from my short time in it and hearing colleagues and friends talk about it, it's like I already anticipated there to be a wall I would hit. So I started taking in stride the opportunities that I did stumble upon into, that still had a very strong leaning in terms of access to education, doing it in international space. So for example, I was an associate with the International Association of Women Judges, and they do a lot of things in judicial training and rule of law initiative focused on specifically creating curricula for women judges around the world on a variety of issues. So it's very tangential, but it helped me really start to see that I have other things that I'm really interested in. How can we facilitate, how can we make the nonprofit be more effective in delivering these trainings? How can we make sure that we're, diversifying the way we're getting our funds? What are the business aspects of things that we're not considering that we should be thinking about? And that eventually pushed me, I guess, into continuing my pursuit of consulting, which I had way back in like 2013. So when that happened, I found myself in a position that, even though I'm not doing international education right now, I'm really glad that I have the opportunity potentially, to work for a client in the federal government / public sector space that is working on these issues, but how to support them in being able to effectively deliver what they need to.
So it kind of sounds like a combination of both need in terms of DC and Bay Area cost of living, but also, yeah, those driving factors that are kind of maybe shoving you one way versus pushing you or pulling you for other reasons. Rebecca, I'd love to hear from you then for kind of how you made that jump.
Yeah, my jump was very, very intentional. Since I'm also in the San Francisco Bay Area, like Mert, I think I was thinking of a lot of the same things as far as affordability and, you know, we're surrounded by tech here. So we meet people daily, we're friends with people that, you know, we're kind of learning in depth about this industry through others. For me, it was two things. I mean, one was financial, certainly, not only to live in the Bay Area, but I really wanted to become financially stable to be able to save for the future. So that was a really big one. And the other was career, obviously, career trajectory. And I think Jesse kind of mentioned this a little bit, but you know, in some situations, whether you're at a provider or at a university or what have you, there's limited funds. So, you know, even if people want to promote you or you're doing a great job or what have you, you know, maybe it's a public university and they're accountable to taxpayers as far as their budget. So, you know, they might be more hesitant to do that. Or if it's a small nonprofit, there's just simply not any funding. And so I really just decided that I wanted to try working at a place where it wasn't such a scarcity mindset, in the sense that, you know, there was, you know, a whole HR department there. So, you know, so that maybe your supervisor has time to kind of sit down with you and talk about like professional development opportunities because there's support behind that. Or, you know, maybe you know, get tapped for some other sort of job or position or project because they see that you have an interest in that. And I did find that at universities, especially, it was very siloed. You know, you come into work and do one thing, and that's mostly what you're there to do. It's hard to kind of shift and collaborate with different teams. And I really also wanted to work at a place where I'd be surrounded by experts in areas that were really different than mine. So now I'm learning from like visual designers, I'm learning about UX research and things like that. And those weren't things that I was really able to kind of hear about as much or kind of work directly with somebody on, or like a legal team and things like that. So I think it was, you know, it isn't just, you know, tech isn't just about like snacks and stuff. It's like the resources to actually help you along your career. Snacks are fine, but I've only been working in tech since COVID, so I have to make my own snacks. But really the abundance as far as sort of the financial backing that'll kind of help you with your professional development and career as well as salary. And that's a given.
Great, thank you. We do wish there were more snacks, and certainly I know the ISEP office always had snacks, so I am definitely missing that. But as a reminder to all of our attendees, and I see that at least one person has put in a question, you're more than welcome to put in other questions. We will be continuing with our prepared ones for a little while until we open it up. But I will turn it over to Erin for our next one.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing your insights so far. I definitely saw some similarities, but also some interesting differences in your pathways as well. So we have kind of a three-part question for you, really focusing on skills, right? So one of the main themes and topics we wanted to cover here today was, what are those specific skills that you can build or have been building that are transferable to other fields, and how can those be put into action? So first part of this is thinking about, you know, what skills or knowledge from your IE background did you find to be the most useful or transferable to your current field or profession? And how did you go about identifying those or figuring out what those were? So let's address those first two, and then we can circle back to the recommendations for kind of future applying. So to start off, how about we go with Priyanka?
Sure. Wow. So I don't know, international education professionals tend to deal with, you know, the phenomena of wearing as many hats as you possibly can, rather than I wear many hats. It's like, give me more hats, right? So I think that that's a big piece of the skills that probably I had to just sit down and be very quiet with myself when I had to identify. It's like, yeah, I helped run a program that's, putting together an orientation, a day-long orientation. But in that, when I deconstructed it, I was speaking to different vendors to feed and find the best, price for that. So budget management, budget tracking, a lot of program management specific things and logistical pieces that I think, especially in the consulting sector, there are a lot of tiny little details that you're constantly trying to work out together. There's the piece where you're delivering directly to your client, but you're making sure that the deliverable that you're working on is, up to par, it's client ready. And that requires the same attention to detail that you would need if you are creating the content for your next blog post to go out about the Study Abroad program, or you're updating the content on the website to make sure that everything is being reflected in terms of, hey, these are the, eligibility requirements. A lot of attention to detail pieces that it's hard until you really break down and see the amount of things that you did as an IE professional that can be applicable to different places. So yeah, program management skills, being familiar with learning new softwares. How many times have you had to learn how to learn this new HR software to clock your time in? That is a huge piece. When you're working with different clients in the consulting world, they'll have their own software that they're trying to push, or their own enterprise system that they want you to learn as a consultant. So you have to be able to, pick up very quickly, learn how to navigate these new platforms, and then be able to use them as though you're an expert. And I feel like as an IE professional, I had to be very quick on the uptake for a lot of this. And I feel like this tends to also spill over to other places, like nonprofit experience in general, where, you're learning how to find crowdsourced, not expensive softwares like Canva or Zoom or whatever your platform is, to be able to work within those spaces. So resourcefulness is another one, I think, that IE professionals definitely have, and that is definitely what clients are looking for from consultants. How are we going to be able to still deliver the same level and quality of work to our customers? How are we going to do this hopefully cheaper? How are we going to do this in a sustainable way? So there are a lot of different balls in the air that I think IE professionals are constantly doing, but I think that, one of the, and here's a practical tip, if this might help you guys. I looked at many people's LinkedIn profiles and I saw how they articulated their experiences. It took a lot of combing. I have an ongoing draft since I'm pretty sure 2014 of just a list of all the copy paste that I've done. And it's still going on till right now. I know I have a job, but it's still always interesting because I start to notice that I want to learn. And I think that's the other great part about having the IE professional background is you're encouraging people to learn new ways to learn, new ways to grow. And you're doing that yourself. You're embodying that as you're doing it, right? So LinkedIn, looking at different people's LinkedIn profiles, seeing how they're articulating their strengths, their value contributions is a really critical way of reframing almost the work that you do have, and, I'll cut this short, but there would be moments where I felt like I was just inadequate. I wasn't doing enough already. And it took a lot of great, good support system to remind me wait, didn't you just say you did all of this stuff in a 60-hour work week and you were able to do this? And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's break this down. Let's show you all the hats that you've been wearing that you have gotten so used to that you've taken for granted, that you're not recognizing for yourself, right? It's the whole, don't look how far you have to go, but see how far you've come sort of mentality, where you look at the stuff that you have and you try to see, can this actually be mapped over to something that this person had in their LinkedIn profile? How would I be able to articulate it? So that's one of my tips.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So many great insights there. Definitely research and reflection and combing LinkedIn. I've done that quite a bit myself. Great. Rebecca, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I think my situation's a little different too, because like I mentioned, I was kind of building these specialized skills before I pivoted. But certainly writing, and anyone that's interested in working in content strategy, content design, or UX writing needs to really build those skills in writing and hopefully get some of that published online. So that was really helpful because I had to actually create a portfolio for the first time and showcase my work. And so I had to, go and look at blogs that I wrote or, social media posts that I created or campaigns that I did to try and include those in there. Um, I definitely think that, just being able to talk and connect to people, which all of us have had to do and adapt when we've lived in different countries or studied abroad. Those are things that are essential, like in an interview, for example. If you're not connecting to the person you're interviewing with, that's something that's important as well. But for me, again, I really did a pivot that was within the work that I was already doing. But to Priyanka's point, what I had to do was translate everything into tech speak. So I looked at also at a lot of LinkedIn profiles, but also looked at tech job descriptions for positions that were interesting to me, or just to kind of learn what positions might be interesting to me. And so that was a really big learning curve, was like figuring out like how are tech companies structured? How are for-profit companies in general structured? It's not like a university. And so, where I was working at Berkeley, there was just a marketing department, but like in a different kind of like industry, there's a product marketing, and then there's, brand, and then there's, whatever. So it was definitely hard for me to figure that out. But once I did, I was able to kind of position that and then figure out which of my skills to highlight. But I do think it's important also to kind of work backwards. Like first, not only think about what skills you have, but think about what kinds of work you want to do. Because there's many different ways that you could pivot into a different field, but it's important to kind of start at the beginning and be really clear on what you want. We at BayPi did a sort of resume, LinkedIn review activity, kind of career mentorship thing. And one of the things that a lot of us heard was, I want to do this, but I also might want to do this or this. And when you're applying to jobs, they aren't generally, outside of IE, I found they aren't generally generalist positions. So it's not like, oh, I've done this and that and the other thing. It's like, you need to know I've done one thing, and then frame your resume for that one task or that one kind of job. So really get hyper focused on what you want, whether that's customer success or, software development or whatever, and kind of cut all the rest from your profile, from your resume, etc.
Great, thank you. Yeah, those are some great tips. I'm thinking about how to craft your message and presenting your brand, right, as you're applying. Jesse, let's hear from you next.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of thoughts on this. We in IE, you have, like you said, Priyanka, like wear all the hats. And when I was looking at jobs, every job description I read, I was like, I can do that. I can do that. Like I've been HR, I've been tech, I've been, the help desk, whatever, I can do all those things. But yeah, it's really important to figure out really how to articulate that and be really clear on what that is. And so I'm actually kind of thinking it from the other end right now. We're hiring like crazy at 2U, and I've been interviewing people all day. So I'm kind of thinking it from the other end and interviewing people. And when people come and are just like interested in 2U in general and don't really know what they want to do and answer really vaguely, saying kind of like sharing that they have all this experience, but not giving a specific example of, how they have that experience and how it can directly apply to that job, is where you get lost kind of. And so it's really important to break it down as much as possible. And yeah, again, kind of for me, when I was looking at jobs, it was really overwhelming trying to explain all of the experience and all of the skills that I felt like I had. And honestly, like I literally just wrote it down in a spreadsheet, and I was like, okay, this is a soft skill. This is a behavioral interview question. This is the skill I have. and this is like the bullet point on the job description that it matches up to. And then like what story or what specific experience can I explain, you know, in real time that I've just, you know, done in the job that can, you know, explain that to a future employer. So I literally broke it down, and I think that's makes it less overwhelming and makes it more impactful for interviewers as well, so that you're, you know, showing that you're actually reading the job description and explaining why you really want that kind of specific job. And I don't know, I was thinking a little bit about kind of the specific skills that are helpful. I am still in a very student facing and university facing role. So there's just very obvious ones where it's like customer service, developing relationships, those interpersonal skills. But beyond that, I think someone mentioned this, but having that ability to be flexible and adaptable, especially during the times we live in right now, where every company is trying to pivot, every company is trying to figure out what the heck they're doing anymore. Having that international education background where all we do is have to be flexible and adaptable and use resources that maybe don't exist, I think are really important more now than ever in any type of company.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing those insights from the other side of the table. It's always helpful to hear for those of us who are going through that process right now or planning to. All right, last but not least, Mert.
Yes. So what I could say about international education professionals, I think the strongest asset that we have is the communication skills. So like you are around so many people with different backgrounds, different interests, different work styles. And higher education has like people who are like age-wise, like a variety of ages that gives you the chance to like see different types of work style. And when I was at San Jose State, which was my last job in higher education, the transition was what Priyanka mentioned, is how to translate these skills. Like, so you do have the skills. Like, for example, my title was International Recruitment Specialist. What does that do? So I did basically business development. I did university recruiting. I did event management. So there's a lot of stuff. But I needed a way to like how to translate that in a language that other people or like people who work in tech or any sector that I want to go to will understand that. So what I did actually, my first step was I followed the path of people who did similar things. So for example, I found an individual who worked in one of the universities and was a university recruiter at Facebook. So I started looking at his background and I started looking at the way that that individual did it. So they went from like a university that they were working at to a staffing agency, and from a staffing agency to Facebook. So the first thing was like being able to find people who did that and went through that path and being able to connect with them. Of course, not everyone is very friendly to like respond to your request on LinkedIn and be just like, hey, I'm happy. I make 15 minutes for you to just talk about how you're going to change your career, like pivot, as you guys are saying. So it's just like that was a difficult time until I was able to find that. But now when I look back, I really divide. So like my brain is very process oriented. I divide everything to points, and that's how I start. So there are so many friends, especially with the SIT network, that are international education who are willing to move to different sectors. And I do have a lot of talks with my fellow SITers about these topics. And what I really see is if you want to switch to any field, the first thing you need is strategy. Like, what are you going to do? And the strategy, I would summarize it into 3 points. So the first point would be like, are you available online? So if you don't exist on LinkedIn with a really good profile, you basically don't exist in the job market. Because, for example, at Google, a lot of people apply for jobs, but Google has like an army of sourcers who go online and source people. So having a good LinkedIn profile makes opportunities came to you even without you applying. So that is or like if you want to switch to, let's say, design related field, there are like certain platforms for each area. And how would you do that? Is again, it's a lot of benchmarking, a lot of going around and studying other people's profiles and seeing like, okay, so this person was in San Jose State, they went to this company and then the other company, what do they do? How does their LinkedIn look like? How do they translate? So for example, instead of writing admission specialist, that is university recruiter. It is exactly the same thing. You are just changing names and like terminology. That's the only thing. Okay. The second thing I see is know your network. So who is around you? For example, the way that I got into Duolingo, I knew a friend of a friend who works at Duolingo, and then I connected with him, and we had a couple chats, and like he referred me, and then I was able to connect with other people. So don't, if you have a decent LinkedIn profile, don't be shy of connecting with people. Of course, not everyone will respond, but like and don't go like, I have a job, I want to apply in your company, can you talk to me? I was just like, that's like a lot. I personally, I wouldn't respond. I get like a lot of these every day. Like, there's a job at Duolingo, can you help me to get the job? I was like, well, write something that's interesting to the person on the other side. Don't think about yourself. How are you going? It's like dating. How are you going to charm the person on the other side? It's exactly what it is. The last part is, I would say, like, have a strategy for every single job and the job that you want. So if you want to join like Intuit, let's say, okay, who do you know at Intuit? Is there anyone who's a friend of a friend, somebody who moved in from higher education, from your grad school, from the community that you are part of? So try to find connections between yourself and the company that you want to join or the job that you want to work. Then work on these connections, and these connections will eventually lead you to the job that you want. So to summarize, we do have a lot to offer as international educators. It just requires a strategy in order to be able to do that pivot. And it's just, and every person have their own story, every person have their own way of doing things, and you need to figure out your own story. You need to figure out your own path that will lead you to where you want to be.
Fantastic, thank you. Very process oriented too in your answer. I appreciated the summary at the end. So this last part here, our next kind of set of questions are going to be more specific about your field, but in addition to anything that you shared already in terms of skills that you found to be the most useful, are there particular areas that you would recommend to IE professionals in general to highlight as advantages of having worked within international education? I know you've already talked about communication, resourcefulness, developing relationships, so many different things. But is there anything else that anyone would want to add in terms of what you would highlight about international education and those advantages that brings, having that experience? And I'll leave it to if somebody wants to jump in, since not everyone might have something.
I think it really depends on the positions that you're targeting. To Mert's point, it varies. And so I think maybe more the question is, what are the skills that people who are hiring for those kinds of positions are interested in? And then that's when you're going to be able to kind of look back and say, oh, I've done that, or I'm good at that, and then put it into their terms. Again, translating it into what is on the job description. Because I don't think that there's any more skills in tech versus IE or anywhere else. It's not based on skills. It's just really how you're getting your skills into their language, basically.
So I'd like to, when I read this question, I was like, this is a great question, because it immediately makes me think that, having been also on an HR side, it's like, and just in my own personal reflection, is like, what is the value I'm going to be contributing to this firm? And what is the value I'm going to be deriving as I see my own career growth? Skills and knowledge can be spun. So I'm looking at my notes right now, and I think I wrote managing competing priorities. So that's a big skill, right? Meeting donor reporting deadlines, tracking, managing budgets, forecasting budgets, implementing activities, making sure the kids are standing in line and have their passports in hand so that they do not put you in a situation you don't have to deal with. A lot of those things are valuable because, or are skills, but I think that focusing too much on what I have and what I don't have is the discussion that comes up with skills and knowledge, which I think we really need to reframe. And I think it should be more, or I would recommend, and I think it was very valuable for me to say, hey, I'm like, hopefully people at my firm feel like I could stay locked in a room for 2 days on end to get this deliverable through to the client with Priyanka, you know? That's a value I bring. I bring the value of my intercultural competencies, having worked with different international communities, been in different, you know, cultural settings, working with people of different statuses, you know, from people from like women judges to, you know, my 3-year-olds in Spain when they wanted to go and were very proud to tell me they were going to the bathroom. So there are a lot of these pieces that I think when we think about skills and knowledge, we're thinking about it literally just as a checklist. And I think that when we're thinking about what my recommendation to be to highlight as advantages is to, one, articulate your value to yourself, show all the ways that you have contributed value to the different places that you have worked, and then use that as the driver for how you're going to show your skills, add value to that firm and add value to your client, to your potential clients. And these things could be as simple as, yeah, like I know how tough it can be when, you know, we have several competing deadlines and someone suddenly gets sick. I know how to provide coverage and surge support, right? I know how to be there and show up as a team member. And that's really, you know, that's really tough. Like this is a lot. I don't know what it's been like for my, you know, fellow panelists up here, but this has been a lot of nights of just scribbling in notebooks and crying over rejection letters and trying to figure out, why isn't this working? What is the right algorithm thing that I need to put in? Because if my resume is getting rejected, they're not even reading the cover letter that I spent like, God, 3 weeks trying to write and like, you know, strategize for, you know, or how come I went through that referral process at that really big firm, but I didn't hear anything. And then 2 years later, I get a rejection letter for something that I didn't even know. So I think that it's twofold. And I guess in a more mindful way, that if you're constantly articulating your value to yourself, in terms of the work that you do, and see less than just like what my career is going to get me and being very like super single focused on that, you'll start to realize that you can infuse that confidence also in the way you're approaching the way you're going to think about your skills and knowledge. Because I feel like once you get to international education and you've been there for even 3 to 5 years, you're no longer at that entry level space. So you need to like elevate and shift that thinking to say, hey, I've been adding value. There's a reason they keep me hired, right? Like there's a reason they're trying to get me to stay here, even though I don't see any professional growth and I've hit a wall. So I'm going to see why they find value in me. And I'm going to make sure that I remind myself of that. And then I'm going to make sure that when I'm talking about my skills and my knowledge, that that's what I'm going to present to people, that this is the value that I bring in terms of having worked in all these other places.
That's fantastic. I love the concept of reframing and as well as, yeah, thinking about how are you just even articulating that value to yourself. It's really important. Jesse or Mert, did you have anything to add on to this?
That just made me think a little bit. When you're kind of transitioning to a different field, in some ways I was thinking like, oh, I have to take a step back or maybe several steps back or even start over. Like I need to start in a new entry-level job, when in reality, like Priyanka was saying, like you actually do have these skills. You just need to be able to explain how that applies to this new job. And so, you know, you have to have some flexibility in saying, okay, maybe I am not going to, you know, get a promotion immediately in this totally new career field, but also not selling yourself short to say, I need to start over, because ultimately you do have those skills. Again, you just need to kind of translate that.
Yeah, I would say it's like, as you mentioned, like it really depends on like understanding the field and like the language of that. For example, like as I said, like admission specialist, if you are transitioning to tech, it's either university recruitment or campus recruitment. And there are a lot of terminology that you need to just understand how to rewrite that or translate that, as Rebecca mentioned, in that situation. But again, it goes through finding someone who's been through the same path and understanding what you are going through, and they will help you to make that translation. And once you get hold of the language, and then once you get hold of what are the areas, what are these people, like the people in the new industry that you are trying to switch to, looking for, that is where like it just comes after that. Like, for example, switching from, like in higher education, we never talk about, like we don't talk about numbers. But when I switched from San Jose State to, for example, at Facebook, just saying that I managed about 5,000 application in San Jose State in terms of like people who were like in the pipeline. I didn't touch all 5,000, but at some point, like they all are candidates of coming back and asking me questions or like interacting. That was like a big thing. Or like being able to, so we never think about like, I do events in like different, like we used to travel, now we do it online in all over the world. So that's like by itself is a skill. Like there are people, if you take them outside of like, you know, the city that they live in, they get lost. They can't like navigate that. But in international education, we can do an event that you have people from all over the world. That is that, like, again, it goes back to the cultural skills and the ability to adapt and work with people who have different backgrounds and different work styles.
Great. All right, so move on to the last set.
Yep, this is another bigger one if it wants to advance. What advice would you give to someone considering the jump to your field from international education? Some of you have, actually all of you have definitely touched on this with the, you know, looking at your current, all of your different hats and what you're doing with that and making sure you're translating that to your new sector or new field. So if you have anything else to add on that, great. Otherwise, please feel free to move on to the next one. What are some positions in particular in your sectors that you think international education professionals may be good for, well suited for, given, you know, the diverse skill set that we tend to offer? Jesse, we'll start with you again.
Okay. I think it comes back to what you want out of your career again. And so for me personally, I was really looking for that opportunity for growth. And I think probably a lot of people have kind of said similar things as well. So advice I would give just generally is look for a company where that's possible. Before, you know, in some of my first jobs, I was like, take whatever I can get, doesn't really matter, I'll figure it out later kind of thing. But this last career move for me, it was really important. And in the interviews that I was in, it was important for me to ask about, you know, what do you actually do to develop me as an employee? What does that actual career path look like? Is it okay to have like interdepartment transfers? Is that supported or is that frowned upon? And ask those types of questions. But yeah, for me personally, it was just really important to have that opportunity for growth. And with that, I kind of mentioned that. So be both comfortable with maybe needing to take a slight step back in your career if that's necessary, but also look really into that industry and what skills you need. Can you start to build those now before applying? Do you already have those and you just need to translate that into a different language slightly? I was thinking with Mert, you know, 2U is very metrics driven and that intimidated me a lot. I had never really, actually kind of like math, but I'd never really talked about numbers in my day-to-day job at ISEP or previously. And so I did a lot of practicing just explaining, you know, what I did at ISEP just in number format, which existed, we just didn't talk about it that way. So I think, yeah, similar to kind of what we've been talking about, just really looking at what that industry uses as language, what that industry really wants, and then overall, I was really looking for growth. But I don't know, should I go into any of the other questions or we can switch for now?
Sure. Yeah, are there any particular positions that come to mind at 2U that you think are kind of ones that would make a good entry point?
Yeah, I mean, anything within student services or university services, we have an admissions department, a student success department, the placement department, which I'm part of. We have university relations. And that's something that's interesting because at ISEP, I was all of those things, I think, and having that split up so specifically was definitely a transition, but anything that's student or university facing is an obvious switch. But also there's the program management and kind of more operation side that I think actually you'd be able to leverage a lot of skills from IE to kind of get into that. And those are less student facing, but more kind of just figuring out how everything works.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things of switching from what I've heard from you, from what I've heard from others who have made that jump of, wait, you mean I only have to do one of these things? Of, you know, I'm used to doing all these different, or having all these different responsibilities, and to have them kind of distilled into one position is a weird thing. So thank you, Jesse. Merritt, what about you? Any advice for someone switching, and any positions you think that would be a good entry point?
So the biggest advice is like, I think something Jesse already mentioned is like, uh, if you are a director somewhere or an associate director or a manager, don't be afraid of like stepping a little bit down. So like, don't think about the titles, because like, I know it might take you 15 years to become a director in higher education. It's a lot faster in other fields. So don't get fixated on that. So I have so many individuals who I will be in touch, and like we will be talking, and they'll be just like, oh, I want to apply for, you know, when I was at Google, like certain like high level positions with Google. And like, I know that people who are in that level, it takes a lot more in their background in order to be able to be there. So it is okay to, like, if you are like a manager and associate director, it's okay to take a specialist role and start from there. And then like the move will be much faster than you experience in higher education. Because in terms of positions, I think in tech specifically, so I would like to like divide the international education folks to two parts. First one would be the admissions and recruitment people. The admissions and recruitment professionals, they could do any type of recruiting job, and it is just, again, so for example, I had today, with Duolingo, we had a coffee chat at Harvard. Tomorrow we have some at Stanford. This is exactly what I did at San Jose State. I used to do the same thing, but I used to do it with community colleges to recruit transfer students. So, and I'm a university recruiter here. I was a recruitment specialist there. So the recruitment and admission folks, they could look at recruiting related jobs. Other areas in higher education, the job title that I suggest is program manager. So program manager role is something that includes, it requires a lot of background and requires a lot of like the different, like this, all this multiple hats that we wear, all the small things that we do. This is what program management required. Among the big companies, the only company that program manager does not mean a program manager, actually it means like working more with technical stuff, is Microsoft. All the rest of the other big companies, the program managers means actual, like doing, like you do the budget, you do work with people in other departments, and you plan events, and then you be sure, like, you know how international student services work with let's say with the folks who are like coming to the US to study international students, and how do they do the orientation for them, everything is special. It's the same thing that program managers do. Another area I would say it's the legal stuff, especially this is specifically for the international student services folks, because there is a lot of immigration laws and like a lot of support to immigration, and the international student services folks, they could easily do that. The only part that I would say from my experience, the international student services folks are missing is the H-1B part. So they know about student visas, they know about J visas, they know about like all the other type of like OPT, CPT, and all this stuff, but they don't know about H-1B visas. They don't know about like, you know, the transfer visas. So if a company has an office in the UK and they want to transfer someone to San Francisco, what type of visa of that? So that is an area that they need to improve in order to be able to apply for a role in tech. And aside all of this, like, don't start with targeting like big companies only. Just like, if you start from a small company, then you will go up. Like if you want to be a recruiter at Google or Facebook, start at a staffing agency. If you want to be a program manager at Amazon, start from like a smaller startup. Or like, I don't know, like I worked for Year Up for about like 9 months. Year Up is a nonprofit, and it's like a bridge between education and tech and training. So it has multiple areas that I was able to use my skills and at the same time put something in my resume that helped me with the next step. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Merritt. Priyanka, I see you nodding a lot to what Merritt was saying. Would you like to jump in next?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the whole international worker dimension for this dialogue. I think that that's something that is also very important to recognize, that when we're talking about this entire pivoting, you got to look and see who you are and where you're from, because unfortunately that affects your ability to pivot. Some people do not have the access to resources to jump because they need that H-1B to continue to stay in the country. I have family, and this is a huge piece of contention, especially given the current political climate. So thank you for speaking about that. And that, yeah, you mentioned it really perfectly, like the legal compliance aspect. Wow, that there's a lot of that in federal contracting and consulting in general. Do you understand, if you're doing something and if a firm or a client is in compliance with something? So advice to give for someone who's trying to jump to federal government contracting. If you've done any sort of grants management work, that's a very tangible skill. You're familiar with the way the US does grants, and the way they are, they, I guess the way that they function and the federal regulations. If you have any sort of exposure and experience within that aspect of in your job experience, I think that that's, a great thing to highlight also. For the level, consulting is very hierarchical. And so you would probably come in as an associate or senior associate. There are also stories of, if you don't have a very clear business background, then regardless of how many years of experience you have, you'll still be brought in at the associate level, which is what happened to me. And like Jesse and Mart said, is that don't be afraid to take that step down. There is no step down. There is just steps to pivot. And then you get there, and then you have to navigate and reconfigure everything. But you kind of have an advantage in that you've got experience in different professional settings. So you're going to be better. It's not going to be your first time doing this. And you kind of also have this, in my experience, where like maybe people might look at your title as associate and they'll only expect a certain level of performance probably from you. But when you start performing and like doing all of these other things, they'll be like, whoa, this is awesome. I want this person to be on my team, and I want them to join me on this other client that I'm working with. As far as skills to learn or hone before entering consulting, I think that's honestly a personal decision. If you have the resources, go for it, learn, take some business classes if that's something that you're interested in. If you don't have access or the time, because, that's also a big factor given that we're in a current situation right now. I think, I don't know, making anybody with any specific background desirable is a really tough question because of the way in general recruitment processes work and the way HR is designed right now. I feel like across the board, they're just not doing the best job in recruiting talent, managing talent, and retaining them. So, this idea of like being, like having your specific IE background, play, it goes back to translating it and like speaking in the lingo of your new employer, your potential new employer. I think that the other thing I would also recommend is learn how different sectors work. Just very basic level. For example, a lot of corporate firms have a recruitment reward for people who are able to refer. It's a referral system. So, that's how I got my opportunity. And I tried quite a few times to get into the consulting world at different firms. And finally, this one stuck. I had somebody within the firm who referred me and then shared my resume with her team. And then the recruitment office called me, God, 6 months later while I was already employed. And I was like, yeah, I'll take the call. Let's see what happens. And I got close to getting to the interview stage. And then they called me and said that actually that contract that they were hoping was going to go through fell through. So I was like, wait, so what does this mean? And then they had, hey, but we're having this other opportunity where we do want to see if you're a good fit for the firm. So how do we bring you on? So I think that there are a lot of avenues. And I think that that's going to be one of the biggest pieces is like, keep your mind open, because opportunities may come in ways that you're not expecting them to. So that jump may be easier with the transition, whether it's a change in title or if it's doing something that you originally didn't think that you were interested in doing.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I've definitely heard that from a lot of people who are saying, well, I didn't get this one position, but they did invite me back for a different one. Before we start moving into audience question and answer, Rebecca, do you have anything to add briefly?
Yeah, I did want to ask that the attendees, if they're comfortable, to maybe just type in the chat the sorts of roles that they're looking for, so then we can kind of tailor some of our responses to the Q&A to that as well, if people are comfortable. Yeah, so it's just as far as the question, as far as positions, this is something I thought a lot about. For stuff that I think you can go straight into from IE, I think it would be customer success, sales. If you like talking to people, those are both really big ones. As long as you can connect to people, like we're saying, that's a big skill that a lot of IE people have. Customer success is basically like customer service centered roles or onboarding. Sales, partnership building is another. So maybe building partnerships with other companies or things like that. That's a big one. Operations as well. If you're kind of like very logical and process oriented, both operations and project management positions, I would say you might be well aligned with. For project management, you might want to look into courses though. You can get certified in Agile or PMP certified. So that would require a little bit of additional work, but that's something that you can start focusing on now. And I think that that's a big piece too, is whatever you're interested in doing next, try and see if you can start doing some of that right now in your work so that you can begin incorporating that in your resume and talking about it in interviews. So kind of just think 1 or 2 steps ahead. Also, localization. If you speak other languages, localization is basically a fancy tech or private company word for translation and kind of making products and services more kind of in tune with local audiences in different parts of the world. So anytime you see localization, you can think of language and cultural stuff, globalization, of course. Areas that you might need to do a little bit more skill building too might be something like visual design, but if you're doing some of that now, try and keep doing it. Learn Photoshop, learn Illustrator, play around with Sketch or Figma if you know what those are. Content is something, if you're a writer, you like writing things, you're blogging, you're doing stuff like that, look into content strategy and UX writing. And then finally, if you've done research, whether it's for your grad degree or maybe you've done some surveys or focus groups at your university or provider to kind of learn about students or what's going on, you might want to look into UX research and think about if that's something you might want to do more of. And then just as far as what to do, just really quickly, because I've thought a lot about this, be open to contract roles. I'm in a contract right now at Intuit, and this is leading to some other opportunities down the line. Contract roles have a much lower barrier for entry in a lot of companies. So once you're there as a contractor for 4 months or 6 or what have you, they're more likely to convert you to full-time. And that's something that I didn't really know happened. And recruiters on LinkedIn, a lot of them will be contacting you about contract roles. I think Mert mentioned this, start collecting data, or no, maybe that was Jesse or both, on your impact. So no matter what that is. So if that's, you talk to, you managed 300 students each semester, okay, 600 students a year. Whether that's percentage, like this increased, or we saved 5 hours a week because I did this thing that saved everybody time. Start noting those things, start writing them down, start gathering and looking at spreadsheets and find any data you can pull, because you just don't want your LinkedIn and your resume to be a list of your tasks. You want them to be a list of how you helped a company, so they will see how you'll help a future company. And I think Mert mentioned, and so did Priyanka, referrals. LinkedIn is a great tool for this. Look at a company that you're interested in on LinkedIn. It'll show all the people that you know that might be working there now. Even if they're friends of friends, don't be afraid to reach out for a referral. This can be the difference between you getting a job and being passed over. Every single job. Do the cold calls on LinkedIn for coffee chats if you do see like a company that you might want to work with in the future. A half an hour conversation with somebody now can mean a referral 5 months from now when a job comes up that you want to do. And the last thing is try and think of a skill that's outside of maybe traditional IE that you can build, and maybe just take a course or two on that, because then people are going to see that you're not just in this area, but you also are maybe more T-shaped and that you know other things, whether that's taking a course on project management, starting a boot camp or something like that, taking a course on graphic design, visual design. Those are things that are going to help you to stand out and show that you have a skill in something a bit more technical, especially if you're looking to get into a more technical field versus maybe customer success or recruitment or what have you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm already thinking of a million more things in my head about kind of along the same lines, but especially I think something that's been coming up from all of you is really, learn to quantify, learn to put the impact you have into numbers, be it the number of students you manage, the number of programs you manage, the number of touch points you have, whatever it is, listing, not your task, but what was your impact really on your resume and your LinkedIn. That's definitely something I've been hearing a lot of. And I know that's, international education is notorious for not liking numbers, at least many of us on the operational level, and especially, of course, SIOs and those who are getting into more strategic levels are thinking of those KPIs and those goals and those numbers. But for a lot of us, that's really something that's difficult to quantify. So we are going to move into the open question and answer. And before that, if my mouse works, I'm going to end the poll. Sorry for keeping this up on your screen, and thank you everyone for voting. It does look like most of you are interested in general higher education, followed by government, technology, with a small percentage of other as well. So thank you for participating in that. And we'll go into the Q&A. It looks like we accidentally closed a question. I'll turn it over to Erin for that.
Yeah, we're going to go to that one first since it was popular. So this question is about the stereotype of corporate jobs in that they're a bit more rigid than higher education. For example, is the stigma still alive of tattoos or colored hair? Can you speak to this? Anything that you miss from higher education or not miss? So whoever wants
I can
to
speak for that one. So what I miss from higher education is international education. Let's specify, like higher education is, for me, is different. For higher international education is, I do miss people with different backgrounds. I do miss the sense of humor. So like people who traveled a lot, they know they know that people come with different sense of humors, different backgrounds, and you can be more yourself around them. And that's what I miss. What I don't miss is like the long procedures that takes ages in order to get something done. That is like something that I don't miss. And in terms of like tattoos and colored hair, like, well, you can see everything. It's just like, it's all like everything is there. It's just like there's more. So this is like, I feel like in corporate side, there is less judgment and there's like more of like, it depends. Like there's like heavily millennials, and millennials really don't care about what others do. Just like, I want to do my job. I want to go home and watch Netflix. So when you have that mindset, you don't really care, versus like someone is sitting in the corner watching, or like, what did this say? What did I do? Like, and other stuff.
And when you're working on Zoom, no one cares because no one can really see you. But it does depend on the industry. I'm sure Priyanka, and you're in the DC world, it's different than San Francisco. In San Francisco, pretty much everywhere you work in the Bay Area, nobody cares about that. And I think that's just becoming more common everywhere. So I wouldn't worry too much about things being buttoned up in the corporate world. If anything, sometimes I feel like it's more open because there aren't all those constraints, like we mentioned before, to donors, to taxpayers, to things like that. It's sort of, we can make our own decisions on our company culture, and that's up to all of us kind of attitude.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think those stereotypes hold with a specific generation within even the DC federal consulting world. However, of course, if your client happens to be DHS or the Pentagon or FBI, I think there are specific, ways that you have to present yourself just because that's what they're expecting. And that's part of their, specific agency culture. However, there are certain agency cultures where there is something like Casual Friday in the office, or honestly, some of them just don't even show up to work on Fridays. But I think that, be your authentic self and bring your authentic self to work and wherever you are, but also read the room. I don't think that that is advice that can ever lead you astray. So if you feel like this is a situation for you to, be yourself and like show your little, tattoo, that's totally fine. Or if you have your hair colored, I don't think it's going to be seen as much, but maybe when you're more client facing, that's something for the, in-person situation. But yeah, we're all in this remote work space world now. And just showing up as though you like yourself, and then like when someone looks at you at the screen, like I would trust you to do that. I mean, this has a lot to do with hidden biases and whatever, but barring all of that, I think it's not something that you should really stress out about.
For 2U, it's definitely less rigid than anything I've experienced. We don't have a dress code. We have unlimited PTO, and it's very flexible. But yeah, I like what Priyanka said, read the room as well. When we're partner facing, we would definitely, maybe shower, dress up a little bit more. But with that being said, like last year, we had a massive Halloween party and I had a partner facing meeting in my Halloween costume and it was fine.
There's a question that like got 7 thumbs up. I'd like to answer is like, how long was your job search for higher education to corporate? I don't think you should put a timeline for that. Again, like you should put your strategy and then like the timeline will take you there. It's just like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be next? And how to find, excuse me, the way there. And just don't, put yourself with specific timelines because that is just going to put stress on yourself. And yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
It depends how often you're doing it. Like I took a year, but it wasn't a full year. Here and there, I reached out to people on LinkedIn. Like I took months to get my portfolio together, and not because that takes months. It's just because I wasn't working on it every day or even every week. But there's so many layers in the process that you want to be sure that you're kind of getting all those done, and that takes a little bit of time.
So I guess there are like 2 pieces I'd like to address for this question is, one, if we're looking at ourselves in a non-pandemic situation, so I don't know what your personal career situation, if you happen to be furloughed or happen to be let go, then yes, there is, your circumstances are telling you there is a timeline and it does impact a lot of things. So in that situation, I think that if you're trying to like speed up that process, check within your own network and see if there are, friends, colleagues that have made that switch to the corporate world. They are able to provide you with an actual internal referral for their system, and they can help coach you get through that process. I think that's the best way to get yourself on the shortest timeline. And that could span anywhere from what the company's experiencing and what their, availability is for recruiting, because they're also asking themselves the questions, do we have the money to spend on recruiting new people? Are we going to decide to spend that money on retaining the people that we have? So unfortunately, in this situation within the pandemic, yes, there's hiring happening, but you have to like really familiarize yourself or like get more of the inside scoop with the people who are there. Maybe even cold call, reaching out to recruiters and being like, hey, I'm looking at this as my life strategy. I'm changing it. So what are some things that I should know? How do I develop this relationship? Like, what does this look like? So when, circumstances are dictating your timeline, that's one of the fastest ways I think that can happen. I also think it's important to look at opportunity and timeline. So if there's an opportunity that comes up that gets you slightly, yes, Mark, yes. If there is an opportunity that comes your way that doesn't necessarily look exactly like you imagined it, it's not a bad idea to consider it, but I would recommend, this is advice my dad actually gave me, don't jump from, you know, the hot pan into fire. I don't know. There's some like idiom. I'm really bad at English idioms. So if you guys know what that one is, feel free to leave it in the chat so I can write it down instead of Googling it. Like, don't put yourself in a situation where you hate what you're doing now, or you're not sure what you're doing now, but just for the sense of relief, you're going to hate yourself even more, or you're not going to enjoy the experience even more. At that point, maybe it does maybe, you know, require you to take a little bit of a step back. And if you can, of course, don't do it if it's not something that makes sense for you. Think about, what do you see in terms of the longer term goal? Thank you, Kelsey. Yes. But for non-pandemic, you know, strained economy situations, I think that timeline literally just doesn't matter. If you have done more than 3 years or even 2 years worth of work somewhere, you are employed, you get to milk that situation to really think and be intentional about what you want to do. As much as I have been trying to get into consulting since 2013, and I just finally got into consulting in 2019, a lot of it was like figuring out what are the different pieces that I want, and then how will this picture come together. There's just a lot of things are changing on the business side of how people are recruiting. So yeah, don't worry too much about the timeline unless your situation dictates that you should.
I would just say, if you are concerned about fast tracking, consider coursework, consider boot camps, because often they come with career support, or hire a career coach or a counselor. And obviously these are things that cost money, but there's also some, you know, resources that are free or low cost online. So if time isn't a concern, there's sort of ways that you can speed up that process versus doing all the work on your own.
All right, and Jesse put in there too, you has boot camps that can also lead to jobs, and that's another way to do it. Yeah, it seems like there were a couple of questions that kind of dealt with a lot of what the panelists spoke to in terms of reach out to those friends of friends, look at your own network and see what is there. Who do you know who might know someone? For those of you who aren't necessarily located in a city or location where LinkedIn kind of is the bread and butter of the career world, you know, maybe looking into that. Both BayPi and YPi, of course, also hold events regularly right now. We do also do resume, LinkedIn workshops, career building panels like these. So that, of course, is another way to do that. I know all of us are very happy to speak with people. If someone approaches me on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to have an informational interview and talk about these things as well. But yeah, looking at your network, using those communication skills and those interpersonal skills that we're also good at. But with that, I am going to wrap it up. A huge thank you from all of us at YPi and BayPi to our panelists for sharing their experiences and their advice, and their pivoting to different sectors outside of international education. Thank you as well to our attendees. We're very happy to have you with us. If you are interested in BayPi or YPi, there are links right here. You can also just Google us. We're all over that search engine optimization. And of course, we also had Josefa drop the contact information of each of our panelists into the chat for you to also connect with them. So once again, a huge thank you to all of you, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone.